In 1992, a vacuum cleaner company in Britain made an offer. Spend £100 on Hoover products and they would give you 2 free plane tickets. Not a discount, not a raffle, 2 return flights, and you could pick America. Those tickets were worth about £600. The vacuum cost you $100. So the free gift was worth 6 times the thing you had to buy to get it. Somebody at Hoover signed off on that. And within a year, it took down a company so famous that British people still use its name as a verb. Start with why anyone thought this was a good idea. Hoover was not a small brand. In Britain, it owned about half the vacuum market. People didn't say they were vacuuming the carpet, they said they were hoovering it. That is the level of household name we're talking about. But by 1992, the warehouses were full. Hoover had far too much stock and a recession outside the door, and somebody needed a plan to move it. The logic went like this. Free flights sound enormous, so people will come in. Most of them will never actually claim. That's how promotions work. You dangle something huge, and the paperwork quietly eats most of it. They budgeted for around 50,000 people to follow through. There's a word for the assumption underneath that number. They assumed people were lazy. In November, they made it worse. The original offer was flights inside Europe. In November 1992, they added American destinations. Now the prize wasn't a weekend in Paris, it was New York. And this is the moment the thing turned. Because the moment American flights were on the table, people did the arithmetic. 2 tickets to the United States for £100 of vacuum cleaner. You didn't need to want a vacuum cleaner, you just needed to want to go to America. So people stopped buying vacuums as vacuums. They started buying the cheapest £100 of Hoover product that qualified, purely as a ticket. Some bought machines they never took out of the box. Newspapers ran stories about people trying to sell brand new Hoovers for £40 because they had already got what they actually came for. Hoover had planned for 50,000 applications. They got around 300,000. 300,000 people, 2 tickets each, 600,000 flights. The promotion had generated about £30 million in sales. The flights they now owed were worth well over $100 million. They had sold £30 million of vacuum cleaners in exchange for a debt 3 times larger. Here is where most versions of this story stop. A company made a maths error, lost a lot of money. Embarrassing. The end. That is not the interesting part. The interesting part is what Hoover did next. They could not afford the flights. And rather than say that, they started trying to make their own customers give up. They began telling people the forms had been filled in wrong, thousands of them. Small errors, technicalities, buried conditions. They offered flights leaving from airports hundreds of miles from where customers actually lived. Technically an offer, practically impossible. And they posted request forms so they landed on Christmas Eve, when the post offices were closing against deadlines the customer could no longer meet. That one wasn't carelessness. You have to choose that date. One executive said it out loud, and it was reported. The whole idea was to put people off going, because every single customer who actually flew cost Hoover money. That's the sentence that turns this from a business mistake into something else. The company was no longer trying to serve the customer, or even to save money quietly. It was actively working against the people who had bought its products. British people are patient, and then they are not. A man named Harry Sitchie started a group for people who'd been promised flights and got nothing, the Hoover Holiday Pressure Group. It ended up with more than 4,000 members. Ordinary people, comparing letters, realizing they were all getting the same excuses. And in June 1993, a customer called Dave Dixon did something simpler. He found a Hoover delivery van and he stopped it from leaving. For 13 days. Not a lawsuit, not a letter to the paper, one man and a van for nearly 2 weeks in front of cameras. The bill came in pieces. 3 senior executives lost their jobs: the managing director, the vice president of marketing, and the director of marketing services, fired over a sales promotion. Maytag, the American parent company, eventually paid around $72 million to settle with roughly 220,000 customers. But between 300 and 350,000 people never got what they were promised at all. Hoover's share of the British vacuum market fell from about half to under 10%. Their machines started appearing at the bottom of reliability surveys, and the royal warrant was withdrawn. That's the formal permission to say you supply the royal household, held for decades. Gone. In 1995, Maytag sold Hoover Europe to an Italian competitor called Candy for about $106 million. That sale was booked at a loss of roughly $81 million. The lawsuits ran on until 1998, 6 years after somebody thought free flights would help clear the warehouse. So what actually went wrong here? It wasn't the arithmetic. Anyone can get a number wrong. It was one assumption underneath the arithmetic, that most people would not bother to claim what they had been promised. That assumption is everywhere. It's in the rebate you have to post, the subscription that's 1 click to start and 6 to stop, the refund that requires a phone call at a particular hour. Every one of those is a company quietly betting that you will give up. Usually, it works. It worked for years before Hoover, and it works right now, today. Hoover's mistake was making the prize so enormous that giving up stopped being the easy option. They offered £600 to people who had spent $100. And at that price, people did not get tired. They formed groups, they blocked vans, they stayed angry for 6 years. The company that taught Britain to call vacuuming hoovering was sold off at a loss by the people who had done the maths. And they were only wrong about one thing. They thought nobody would bother.